So I was planning on recording a different episode this week, but then something happened and it completely changed my mind. It started when I was at the staff alignment boot camp. We were doing a session during the staff alignment boot camp, and I gave the group an exercise that was designed to help them to start thinking about their 100% vision. Now, I told them to just simply do this: picture a student who is not succeeding in your school currently, not a composite kid. I wanted them to picture a real kid, somebody who's always in their office or who's always consuming more of your energy and your resources than you'd ever want to admit aloud. So once they had that kid in their minds, I said, okay, good. Now imagine your school was running exactly the way that it should. Everything was perfect. Every adult in the building was relentlessly doing what they were supposed to be doing for every kid all the time. And then I asked them, in that scenario, what's possible for that kid now? And so I asked them to put their answers into the chat. And after a brief pause, the answers started rolling in. He will come to class. She wouldn't get any more referrals. He would feel supported by the adults in the building. She would be able to regulate her emotions. He would come to class prepared and have all his materials. And that was it. That was the ceiling over and over and over again. The biggest thing that anyone could imagine for a struggling kid in a school that's running at its absolute best was that he'd show up or she'd stop getting written up. And so at first I thought, okay, maybe they misunderstood the question. Maybe they were giving me what they considered to be, the first step in the process. So I restated the question and clarified. I said, listen, don't think about the school that you have now. Think about what your school could be. In that school, that dream school, what is possible for your students? And still, almost nobody typed she'd be on grade level. Almost nobody typed he would be reading. Nobody said she would graduate with real options in front of her, or, he'd take an honors class or hold a leadership position in the school that used to send him to the office. It was just waves and waves of come to class and get by. And I sat there watching that chat window fill up. And I had to stop myself from jumping in and correcting people, because that's not actually the point. The point isn't that any one of them typed a small answer. The point is that a room full of capable, caring, experienced educators, people who, chose this work because they believe in kids, people who were spending their spare time on a training, even they could not, in a moment that mattered, imagine more than survival for a child in whom they'd been investing significantly. And that was only if their school were running perfectly. I'm going to tell you the truth, y'all. It really broke my heart. As much as I wish this were an isolated occurrence, I've had two other versions of this same conversation just this past week. One was with the superintendent of a large district. He called and he wanted some professional development for his principals. And after listening to the challenges that they were facing as a district, I suggested that we start with some vision work. And the superintendent immediately said no. And I said, well, why? And he says, I don't think they're capable of setting or achieving a 100% vision. Now he softened it. He said, yeah. And I said, that's the whole point. I mean, everything starts with a vision. Stuff changes right away with a vision. But he said no. And then I had a member of BU, someone who's done, she's worked really hard to get a vision that she actually believed in. And she came to office hours and she said she wanted to change her vision. And I asked her what her new vision was. And she gave me a watered down version of her vision. And so I stopped. I said, wait, hold on. What happened? And then she looked down and she said, honestly, I was writing my vision story to share with my staff on the first day of school. And I just know they're going to push back. I thought it might be easier if I gave them something they can actually do. Now, I've actually had that conversation a lot. I mean, even during the boot camp, when I was coaching people, they had big visions. But then when it came time to talking about let's build it, they said, well, let me start with something easier. Let me give people a destination they could swallow. And I'm seeing this more and more lately, and I can't for the life of me figure out why. Maybe it's because summer's ending and we're facing the reality of a looming school year. Our teachers are going to be back any minute and are going to be looking for you to give them direction for the year. And so right now you're planning PD, you're picking a theme, you're plotting about how you're going to get people to actually use the curriculum or actually use the PLC protocols or actually upgrade the reading instruction or build real instructional coherence. So you're writing an agenda for the first staff meeting and you're deciding what goes on the wall in the front office. And underneath all of that planning, you may be already doubting whether your staff has the will and the skill to do what you're asking. I get that, right? You've probably watched initiatives die in this same building before. You've watched a room go flat the moment you said the ambitious version of the plan out loud. So this year, you tell yourself you're going to be smarter about it. You'll pitch it smaller. You'll make it easier to swallow. You'll make it more realistic. And meanwhile, the data in front of you still hasn't changed. Learning and opportunity gaps still exist. Some students still struggle. Others aren't reaching their full potential. You know that your school needs more, but you're too afraid to ask. So you shrink the ask. You round it off. You tell yourself you're being reasonable and realistic and you're making it more palatable. And in the process, without ever even deciding to, you lower your own expectations. Ask yourself honestly, does your back to school speech offer teachers a 100% vision or merely what you think they will swallow? Is the PD that you're planning right now designed to turn all your teachers into master teachers? Or is it designed just to keep your most resistant ones quiet? Are your plans for the year built to get you closer to 100%? Or are they written to give you a tiny incremental gain? You see, we spend a lot of energy frustrated by the low expectations that we see in our teachers. But I always say, the fish rots from the head. How can you expect teachers to have high expectations of kids if you don't have high expectations of them? I blame this, not on you, I blame this on how we were trained. Because somewhere along the way, we were handed two messages at once. The first message was dream big, all means all. And then the moment we actually do that, the moment we say the big thing out loud, someone was there to warn us that we're being naive and unrealistic. And we were coached gently and repeatedly, but coached nevertheless towards reasonable goals, incremental ones, achievable ones. And if you've been in a building for any length of time, you already have a memory of a time where you bought a big goal to your staff and you watched the room's naysayers kill it in real time. And maybe it was a department meeting. Maybe it was a staff retreat. You said the big version, every kid reading on grade level, every kid earning all their credits every semester, whatever it was. And you watched a few faces go tight. You heard, that's not realistic for our population, and you quietly filed it away. Lesson learned. I won't do that anymore. So you learned the lesson the system was actually teaching. Underneath the one it said it was teaching, right? We learned that in order for teachers to cooperate, they have to be appeased. And appeasement has only one move, which is shrink the goal down to whatever you think they will accept. Except when you shrink and you appease, things don't slowly decline. The failure is instant. The second that you decide only what you think others will accept, your actual dream, the one that you're not saying out loud, is being held hostage by other people's fears, other people's lowered expectations, until their lack of imagination extinguishes your own. And here's what's worse. The moment you lower your expectations, you set up a vicious cycle, because the less you ask of your teachers, the less they give you. The less they give you, the less you expect from them. So here's the 100% principle. You cannot ask teachers to believe in every kid while you've quietly stopped believing in them. Now, most of us would say without hesitating that we believe in all of our staff, but belief isn't a cute catchphrase. Belief is what you're willing to ask for. And if you've been asking for less, if you've been rounding down the goal, softening the ask, telling yourself that you're being reasonable, well, you've already told your staff in the only language that actually counts, by the way. You've told them what you think they're capable of. The superintendents who, sidestep vision work, they would tell you without a second of hesitation that they believe in their principles. So they reach out and ask for help. But when I offer the work that would actually help their principles, they say no. Now, they may have legitimate reasons for saying no. I'm not saying that. The funding may not be available, the timing may truly be wrong. But sometimes those practical concerns sit alongside a quieter assumption, which is, even if we made the investment, could our principals really do this? But here's a challenge, right? If you withhold the development principals need because you doubt their capacity to benefit from it, that doubt becomes self-fulfilling. They never receive the support that would help them become capable. And their lack of capacity becomes further evidence that investing in them would have been a waste of time and money. Now, before you jump all over the superintendents, principals, the same thing is true of you. When you shrink your vision, this is the same thing will happen. And I'm sure principals will tell you that they believe in their staff. Well, most of them, right? They may even tell you that if it weren't for those resistant few, they could do more in their schools. So they start low and slow, and they promise themselves that they're going to ramp up later on, except they never do, because their lowered expectations of their staff have lowered the ceiling for everyone. It's also true for your teachers. The teacher who shrinks their belief in kids would tell you that they still believe in all kids. So they plan ambitious lessons and they hold to the standards. That is until a kid with profound SEL issues kirks out in the classroom. And soon, those same teachers are asking for less and calling it kindness. And we hear it so much that we begin to embrace the same false dichotomy, which is either ignore their needs or lower the standard. We never consider that maybe there's a third option that allows you both to meet our students' SEL needs and help them meet the standards. But the moment you interrogate your expectations and you embrace a 100% vision, the dissonance of asking yourself to hold a standard that you stop holding for them goes quiet. You start believing again, and the work feels different almost immediately because you finally stop settling. And something else shifts too. You start seeing your staff differently. There's a move I use in myself constantly, especially when I'm working with a teacher who is frustrating me. You probably have had the same experience as a teacher. You're pouring into that teacher, the teacher's just not getting it. And in those moments, when I want to dismiss a teacher, I ask myself, what if this teacher were a student in my classroom? How would I handle her? I know it sounds small, but it does something really important. It pulls me out of the bias that says, this is an adult, she should know better. And it puts me back into the posture that actually built this principle in the first place. I realize that I've been entrusted with this person, and it's my job to help them. I challenge you to try that on the next teacher who frustrates you, not the star, the one who's missing deadlines or pushing back in meetings or seems checked out. Ask yourself, if this teacher were a struggling 10-year-old, what would I do? What does this person need from me that they're not getting? Not what's wrong with them. What do they need? And that single substitution, need instead of wrong, that single substitution is this principle in action. That's the whole reframe, not lower the bar for the teachers because they're incapable. It's about raising your belief in them the same way you're asking them to raise their belief in their students, even when their students are also frustrating. They're also checked out. They're also not responding to everything they do. You have to model the very thinking and the very belief that you are expecting from teachers. Now, here's what's at stake. The more you lower your expectations, the more you build a school you never actually wanted. And you let yourself down. The dream that you had for the difference that you wanted to make quietly dies. And in its place grows something much uglier: resentment. You see, you start believing that your staff could have done more if only they stepped up, and you begin to resent them for it. That resentment festers over time. Now, there's a cost to your staff too. You see, they feel the lowered bar. They feel the resentment underneath it, even if you never say a word. And you know what? They resent you back. Now, some settle into compliance, others just phone it in. That resentment starts to be two-way, and your school stops being the school that you need it to be. And because the bar keeps lowering, your staff hits the ceiling more often than not, and they begin to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's the kids who pay the real cost, right? They're relying on your ability to see more from them than they can see for themselves right now. I mean, that is the job. So if your dreams for them shrink, so do their prospects. So does their future. Go back to those kids from the boot camp, the ones who, even after being in a perfect school, are still only capable of showing up, bringing their books, having an adult that they feel they can talk to. Is that really the best we can imagine for all our students? Any low expectations that you have for your staff, for your kids, they're showing up right now in the decisions that you're making, and it's showing up without you even realizing it. You know, it's showing up in your back to school speech. It's showing up in the PD you're planning, in the let's just get them to this point. That's all they can really handle part of your plan, right? Those plans are what determine the year that you're going to have. You know, a principal who does this work now, this week, who really interrogates their expectations and looks at all of your plans for the coming school year through the lens of whether or not this is communicating high expectations or not. If you do this work now, this week, before the buses start running, before the kids come back, then you will walk into the first staff meeting with a plan that is built on your vision, not just what's comfortable. And when you do that, you're not just guessing what the year could be. You already know. And your staff can feel it too. They can feel the difference between a leader repeating a theme from a poster and a builder who actually means it. So here's your 100% move for this week. It's the same exercise that I gave the boot camp room, and I want you to actually do it, not just read it or think about it. I want you to picture one kid from last year who was struggling. Maybe a kid who was always in your office. Maybe a kid who ate up everybody's time and all your resources more than any other student in the school. A kid you care about, a kid you've been working with and struggling with, right? I want you to name that kid specifically in your head. You might even want to write that kid's name down. And now imagine if your school was doing everything right. You know, imagine even your most resistant teacher was on board. Your entire staff was aligned and they were relentlessly pursuing success for every single kid. How does that kid's life change in that school? And I want you to write down the answer. Don't just think about it. I want you to write down the answer because that answer is the kernel of your 100% vision. Now, once you've written it down, I want you to take that same outcome and I want you to hold it up against one of your stronger students, you know, the student that is going to be president one day, or the student who is just everybody loves, the student is thriving, he or she is a delight to have in the classroom. I want you to think about that vision and compare it to your strongest kid. Is that vision big enough for your most successful kid? Or did you just describe, you know, survival for one kid and call it a vision? Now, it should take you about 5 minutes, but it isn't a 5-minute favor to yourself. This is a real diagnostic. Pay attention to how it feels reading back what you wrote. Does it excite you? Does it scare you a little bit? Because it should. That's a sign that you're dreaming again and not just managing. Now, if you didn't feel anything at all, or if it was meh, that's information too. It means you're carrying a shrunken vision, and it's time to give yourself permission to dream bigger. Now, don't worry about the how yet. That comes later. Right now, all you owe yourself is to have the big dream, the one you came into this profession with. Now, a couple of things. If you're ready to do this, Well, our next cohort for BU is still open. It closes Monday, July 27th at 5 p.m., but you still have time to join the next BU cohort. And I'll make sure that I put the link here, or you can go to buildershipuniversity.com and you should see something there. So if you want our help with building that vision, please join us. Now, I will tell you, and I get in trouble for this, but I've been at this work long enough to know what I'm talking about. Your vision is not too big, it's more likely to be too small. And not only that, but once you open up, once you allow yourself to truly say aloud and legitimately pursue your vision, everything changes. I want that for you this year. So get some rest, do the exercise, and then let's get ready to build that vision this school year.